The screen is pitch black and you can hear the biting wind whistling through the high peaks. Suddenly, the footsteps of a hiker stop and the wind cuts out instantly, replaced by a deafening silence. It is a sensory deprivation that feels heavy and unnatural. A muffled and panicked breath is heard. Then a strange metallic hum begins to vibrate the air. A sharp intake of oxygen, and then absolutely nothing. Hello everyone. David Paulides here, and welcome back to the channel. For those of you who are brand new to this research, I have spent the last decade plus investigating a phenomenon that the authorities simply refuse to acknowledge. Specifically the National Park Service. They just do not want to talk about this. I call it the missing 411. And it is far more than just people getting lost in the woods. People get lost every single day in the wilderness. That is a tragic but normal reality. But this is different. We are looking at a very specific set of circumstances, a profile of disappearances that defies every conventional explanation we have available to us. Today we are going deep into the high country to examine the Rocky Mountain mysteries, focusing on what I have termed the high altitude voids. These are specific geographical clusters where the air gets thin and the granite formations are massive. Places where people seem to walk right out of our version of reality and into a vacuum. I am just stating the facts here. I am not a conspiracy theorist. I am a researcher. And the hard facts in these specific cases are deeply, deeply disturbing to anyone who values the truth. Let us start in the Douglas County region of Colorado back in July of 1981. Maurice Dametz was 84 years old at the time. Now, Maurice was not your typical high-altitude hiker. He had very bad knees and could barely walk on his own. He was a retired professor of theology, a man of extremely high intelligence, which is one of our key profile points. He was out with a friend named David McSweeney hunting for topaz in a very specific area. McSweeney helps Maurice down a small incline to a digging spot so he can rest and work. David then goes about 150 yards away to his own spot. He tells Maurice, "I will be back in 10 minutes. Just 10 minutes. That is all it took. When David returns to that spot just moments later, it is completely empty. Maurice's tools are still sitting there. His bag is right there on the ground. But a man who could barely walk, a man who needed physical assistance just to move 20 feet, had vanished from a flat piece of ground. No tracks were found. No blood was spilled. And there was no sign of a struggle. The K9 units were brought in later, but they could not find a single scent trail to follow. It was as if Maurice had been lifted straight up into the sky. Many of you also know the name Jaryd Atadero, but you need to understand his case in the context of these high-altitude voids. October 2nd, 1999. 3-year-old Jaryd is with a group of hikers in the Comanche Peak Wilderness. Jaryd runs just a little ways ahead of the group on a well-defined trail. He turns a corner just out of sight. The rest of the group follows seconds later, but Jaryd is gone. The search that followed was massive, involving helicopters, infrared technology, and hundreds of ground searchers. They found nothing. Not a single trace of that little boy was located for years. Then, 4 years later, hikers find his clothing thousands of feet higher than where he originally disappeared. His pants were found inside out. His shoes were in pristine condition with no scuffs, even though he would have had to crawl over miles of jagged granite to get there. And here is the kicker. Searchers had been in that exact spot years prior, and he was not there then. He essentially appeared there later. This is a recurring profile point in these Rocky Mountain voids that we see over and over again. When you look at these cases collectively, the coincidences stop being coincidences. First, there is the silence. In almost every account from survivors, they describe a zone of silence where the birds stop chirping and the wind just dies. It feels like being inside a sensory deprivation chamber. Then we have the geographical obstacles. Victims are frequently found in unreachable locations. To get where Jaryd's clothes were found, a 3-year-old would have had to be an elite mountaineer. It is physically impossible. And yet, there the items were, sitting on the rocks, waiting to be found. Then there is the weather. As soon as the search starts, a freak storm hits the mountain. In the Rockies, we see this constantly. It is as if the mountain itself is trying to scrub the crime scene clean of any evidence. And finally, the canine failure. Expert bloodhounds will often just sit down and refuse to track. Or they will start circling as if the trail just ended in midair. I have spent a lot of time thinking about what could do this. I have looked at the data and listened to the witnesses who actually survived. And there is one theory that is becoming harder and harder to ignore. As disturbing as it may be, I am talking about invisible entities. I know how that sounds. But listen to the evidence. In the high-altitude voids of the Rockies, there are reports from very credible military and search and rescue personnel of shimmering in the air. They describe a distortion in the woods, a ripple in the light. Is it possible that something lives in these granite fields that we cannot see? Something that can manipulate local physics or change its frequency to stay hidden. If you are in a void, you might be in a hunting ground for something that does not belong to our biological tree. Native American tribes in the Rockies have spoken for centuries about the ancient ones. Spirits that live in the rock and can become invisible at will. We call them myths. But when a man with bad knees vanishes in 10 minutes, myth starts to look like a very grim reality. The Park Service still does not keep a central database of these missing people. Why is that? If you ask them, they will tell you it is too expensive or it is not their job. I do not buy that for a second. I think they know there is a pattern they cannot explain. And they do not want to scare the public away from the park gates. If you are heading into the Rockies or any high altitude area, please do not go alone. Carry a personal locator beacon, though even those have been known to fail. Above all else, pay attention to the silence. If the woods go quiet around you, you need to leave that area immediately. I am David Paulides. Stay safe out there.